ప్రేమ స్వరూపులారా, విద్యార్థులారా, who am I.
Welcome to InSAIde Scoop, a podcast that brings you practical servings of Swami's sweetest teachings. Guys, today's episode is supremely timed. Just as the Singapore-Malaysia land borders reopen freely after 2 long years, we are joined by Sister Vaishnavi Nair from Singapore. Vaishu, as I fondly call her, is a search policy lead at Google, has been serving as a regular bhajan singer and SSA guru since she was 16 years old. She's also conducted workshops in Parthi during the Zone 4 Young Adult Retreat in 2019. And honestly, in my view, she's the person that comes closest to living Swami's values on a day-to-day basis. Hi, Vaishu.
Hi, Neil.
I'm so happy to have you here.
Yeah, same. Happy to be speaking with you.
You know, Vaishu, there's so much suffering and hardship in the world today, right? People are still recovering from the effects of the pandemic, and some lives are being torn apart as we speak in areas like Russia and Ukraine. So in times like these, I often feel conflicted about how to feel, how to react, and how to respond. Because Swami keeps saying that a full-time devotee is one who is equanimous. And in practicing this, I struggle to find the balance. Do we have to suppress the empathy and compassion in order to be, equanimous in the way that Swami has prescribed?
So it's a very deep question, Neil, and it comes in I think my answer will come in multiple parts. But before we even jump into where we're going with this, we have to come to the same page as to what we define by equanimity. Because equanimity is not, and this is how I used to understand it before as well, was that, I don't feel anything, I don't react to anything that comes my way, whether it's joy or happiness. So equanimity doesn't mean not having emotions or not feeling things.
Right.
But in some sense, it is about, so equanimity allows you to react basically to anything that's happening in life, but it's how soon we're able to recover from our reaction.
Right.
And so a good example of that would be, say there's a storm and there's a tree. I read this somewhere really, and that this example really sticks with me across years. Is there's a storm and there's a tree, and the tree is shaking in the storm, right? So some trees shake a lot, some trees don't shake a lot. But are you going to be uprooted when the storm comes, or are you able to come back to normal? How soon are you able to recover? And that is how equanimous you are. And ideally, what will happen is, when we start practicing this concept of equanimity, is we start shortening the reaction time. So something bad happens to us, how soon do we recover? And to such a level that we're able to recover even before we react.
Wow.
And that's a very special magical place. And when that happens, then whenever something happens to us, what we send out into this world is this very thoughtful, considered, loving response. So it's really, how do we get there? Like, how do we shorten our reaction time? How quickly do we recover? And how are we able to respond lovingly, consciously? That is what equanimity is, the final state of equanimity. Some people, as you know, including myself, I wasn't made head girl when I was in school. I was 17 at that point. And it stung me for years, okay? So I really did not recover. My recovery time for that was extremely long. But then recently, last year, 2021, in April, I didn't get promoted. I was up for promotion, and it was supposed to be, people around me said it was very well deserved, I should have gotten promoted, and I didn't get promoted. And even before the answer, my manager told me the outcome, I was fine. She told me, and in that same meeting, I walked out, and my husband thought I'd gotten promoted by just the way I was talking. And he was like, okay, so do we go celebrating? And then I was like, oh, sorry, Sagar, I forgot to tell you, I'm not promoted. and it wasn't me acting or play acting. So I think that's the thing, like how short. And I think the head girl part, to wrap that up, it still stung me till about last year. So it's really, how soon are we able to recover from what's happening.
That's a fantastic perspective, Aishu. I mean, being equanimous doesn't equate to being emotionless, right? It's about that recovery time.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if I told you the story before, but when you were sharing your head girl promotion stories, it kind of aligned to the story I heard Sanjay Mahalingam narrate about Swami. So, and so I'm just going to share it for the benefit of our listeners as well. So Swami's brother Sanjay Mahalingam, who's Swami's student, once narrated how once when they were in Tribe Vrindavan, Swami entered the room and he saw someone in that room. Swami saw someone in that room and he became very, very, very angry at this person. He flared up, okay? And in Sanjay Mahalingam's words, he gave it left, right, and center. The kind of anger that he'd never seen, Sanjay had never seen. And the way he describes it is, we always say Swami is pure, right? Like he's pure love, he's so pure. Well, his anger is also pure, undistilled anger. The things he was saying, like, you would have just wanted to crumble and, let the soil absorb you. And Sanjay was 3 feet away from Swami's eye line and he was shaking because he was so worried what was going to happen if Swami looked at him in that moment, okay? And Swami was like shaking with rage while he was shivering with fear. And then Swami turned to him, and in a split second, Swami turned to him and said, Bangaru, kabhi aaya, with so much love, just the next second he was as cool as a cucumber that Sanjay was just completely disoriented. How did he switch from this rage to love in a split second? So like even Swami, who's the epitome of perfection, has emotions and he displays them. But I guess this resonates so much with what you were saying. Swami is so much more than those emotions, that the emotions are like just the ripples on the surface, but he's like he's the far deeper and wider ocean like beneath that, right? And that's why he recovers so quickly. And based on what you were sharing, it sounds like you're almost there, so way to go, Vaishu.
We might clarify it, but I want to clarify there, so you were saying reaction, it's how quickly you recover, right? I think for Swami, he doesn't recover. His recovery happens before reaction. So what he was doing in that room which Sanjay sir witnessed, I think what was happening there was a response. It was a loving, considered response given. Swami wasn't reacting in the heat of the moment, because that way one interpretation that from whatever we discussed could be people who are really short-tempered but recover really quickly from their temper could be like, hey, I'm fine, I'm really equanimous, I recover quickly after I shouted. That's still a reaction, right? You're letting your emotions take over you completely. But with Swami, what would have happened is that he has long recovered. Like there is no reaction. Everything that's happening is a response. It's all love driven. And so his is that perfect equanimity where everything's already happened and what's coming out is very considered.
I guess so, yeah. I mean, considered, like in his heart there's still a lot of compassion and he just displays whatever needs to be displayed in that moment, but there's no ill feelings being harbored inside. Yeah, exactly. So it's a very conscious response, a conscious response that I need to speak in an angry tone in this moment. Is that what you're saying? Okay, great.
Yeah. But it's a very conscious response.
That brings me to the next question. How do we deal with like prolonged suffering or happiness? Do we deal with it? Is it the same principle, like that it's all about the recovery time?
Okay, so this recovery time instance works very well, or this logic works very well in my life when things are happening, momentarily, right? But when something is prolonged, like you say, then it requires a lot more practice and a lot more sadhana, I would think. And so but to that, a good concept for us to know is something called baseline joy. So So, and I want to ask you a question back, Neil. So, if there were two people today who one person won the lottery and another person lost the usage of their limbs, they were in a car accident and they lost the usage of their limbs, who do you think is happier at this moment?
The guy who lost his limb for sure is sadder than the guy who won the lottery ticket.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? Like today. But then 1 year later, maybe that's where you're coming from. If I was looking at them 1 year later and I asked you, who do you think is happier, Neil? Is it the lottery winner or the person who was paralyzed? What would you say?
I think the person who's paralyzed, because the lottery winner's excitement would have faded away, so he's not as happy anymore, whereas the guy who lost his limb is probably feeling the same as he did the last year. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so that's actually, this is a very spiritual answer you're giving. But then a bunch of, which is absolutely right. But what's amazing is that a bunch of researchers, who with probably I had no connection to spirituality and this type of thinking, went ahead and surveyed folks who won the lottery on a certain day and folks who had been paralyzed on that same day, on how they were feeling. I don't know how they meted out that questionnaire to the paralyzed people, but whatever.
I'm curious to know that.
Read the room, guys. But yeah, so that was. But then 1 year later, they went back and they surveyed these folks again, and it turns out that how people react to anything that's happening, especially prolonged joy or prolonged suffering, it really depends on how happy they are generally as individuals. Like, what is your baseline joy? Like how, and that baseline joy really determines how you're going to go through life, especially when things are happening to you constantly, right?
Right.
So that's one part of the equation. Now the second part is that when something's happening all the time, what I try to do is, the first thing I tell myself is that it's the mind. It's the mind that's doing whatever it's doing. It's not like it's my mind is reacting. That's the first thing. But the second thing is, almost in the same breath, I tell myself that, and the mind is allowed to react. I don't want to blame the mind for feeling bad. So again, going back to work example, like I had a really difficult boss. Okay, it was 10 months of torture in my mind. But then what would happen is that at the beginning I would be angry at whatever is happening, to the injustice or so as I saw it. But then secondly, I feel guilty about feeling angry and not being equanimous. So that's when I learned that I need to start accepting that I'm allowed to feel this way. My mind is allowed to feel this way. And the moment I give myself a chance to speak instead of suppressing these emotions, like I just listen to my mind out as a third person, then I feel more empowered to start putting myself in my manager's shoes, or whoever else is in the situation with me. So then I'm able to step out of Vaishnavi, the individual, and into my manager's shoes, and then I'm able to listen to his perspective out, and then it's like arbitration, right? Like a mental arbitration where I come, both parties are on my mental table, and then I'm like, okay, what would Swami say over here? And then I've understood the situation a lot more clearly, and then after that I would use affirmations, to try and change the situation. So I write down or word out how I would like the situation to play out, and I'm a lot more loving and thoughtful in my response and compassionate in my response because I understand where the other person is coming from. So essentially, the steps that I would follow, to recap, would be I would listen to my mind. That's very know it is a mind, but then also listen to my mind. I think oftentimes we skip that step and then just go straight into trying to sort of empathize with the other person, and that doesn't always work for me, at least. So I would listen, then dissociate, and then go and put myself in the other person's shoes, and then try and fix the situation or accept the situation using affirmations.
That's a powerful formula, Vaishu. I guess we all have different degrees of our ego self, right? And I suppose in hearing yourself out, your ego self feels like it's being acknowledged, and then you can put yourself in someone else's shoes without feeling the guilt or the resentment. That's a really great formula. And do you use the same process when the object of your pain or your pleasure is not a person but a situation. For example, like a friend is experiencing a difficult time and you want to empathize and but you don't want to also lose your equilibrium and your equanimity.
This actually goes back to your first question and how this entire conversation started, right? Like, how do we be empathetic without losing our equanimity? And I would say that the best part about being equanimous or knowing how to get there quickly is that you're able to elevate empathy into a compassionate response.
Wow.
And that takes a little bit to sink in, because that took some time for me to really understand and feel. And it's one thing to understand, but another thing to feel, and then having to practice it. So the thing is, what happens when we're empathetic is that sometimes we're just stuck at feeling, right? Things are happening, your friend is sick, and then you feel numbed because of all the sadness that you're feeling for them. Or you can take the Ukraine war, right? Like oftentimes we're all empathetic people. Human beings are wired that way. We get angry when we are provoked. We're compassionate when we are triggered, and we have an automatic reaction to the pain and needs of our loved ones, or even strangers, who are in distress. So that's us as a human being. That's a sign of Swami within us. Right. But then we really need to tap into it. We can't leave it at that. And if we leave it there, what ends up happening is we get numb. So you've seen a lot of us, the best amongst us will see a bad news on TV, and then we would just switch it off because or we don't read like bad news or whatever, because we don't know how to react to it, or we don't like our reaction to it. And so the thing with equanimity is that we are able to, if we are equanimous and we know, then we're able to sort of recover quickly, and then we're able to elevate our empathy into compassion, to a compassionate response. And what I mean by that is that we're able to act. Right. Again, when I say we're able to act, that doesn't mean that like take the Ukraine war, I quit my job and I go there and I start volunteering there, right? Like that's one way, that's one action. But again, people sometimes do that in the heat of the moment. So that's one way to act. But then every time, whatever we do, we're sending out, like whether it's a thought, whether it's our words, whether it's our action, all of these are responses. So it doesn't just have to be in deeds, it can be in thoughts and words as well. So if there's a situation that you're not that isn't great, doesn't involve another person, but it's just a situation that you're uncomfortable with, being able to give out a considered, compassionate response could just involve prayer at times, like closing your eyes and chanting Gayatri for any situation. That itself is such a powerful way to respond. So it's really like, when you're equanimous, I would say that you're able to move from empathy, from empathy to compassion, to a degree of being involved enough to be able to act instead of being numbed into being numbed.
Beautiful. So this is a 360 shift in my perspective, thanks to you, because actually that equanimity is the catalyst, not the sort of the burden that is like suppressing you. But it's actually the catalyst for you to convert what is just an emotion or a feeling to a very conscious, compassionate response rather than a reaction, right? It's that equilibrium, that equilibrium that comes with equanimity that can help you respond rather than react from the emotion. Amazing. And I'm so glad you raised the Russian war, because I remember when it began, you spoke to me and you were like, oh my God, Neer, I wish I could help, and like I just want to do as much as I can to help. And I felt the same way. But I also remember telling you, but Vaishu, like, isn't this all their karma? Maybe they were all corrupt politicians in their past lives. And of course, we should still help. But knowing that this is all karma, I felt like it was holding back my level of empathy, So how do we approach this? Like, ensure that knowing that it's all karma doesn't impede our level of empathy and equanimity.
So knowing it's all karma will not impede your equanimity, right? Because you know that everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So I think that would help. But where it can start, like you're saying, where it can start eating into you is when it starts halting your empathy, or it halts your compassionate response.
Right.
So I have two views there, which I've shared with you before. But one of that is this very elevated spiritual view, and another is this which I don't understand, but I know that's the right answer, so I will tell you that for sure.
Okay.
But there's also this mean, sort of a more selfish view on the situation. And I'll start with that though, because that's more relatable to me. So the thing is, if whatever other people's karmas are, the fact that you know about it, you are constantly sending out like a reaction into this world, right? Like, so it is in your best interest to do something to help people, and because whether it's through prayer or through action or through words or through deed, it's in your best interest to be the best version of yourself, because the law of karma applies to you as well. So from
Right.
just this pure self-preservation mode, when someone else is suffering, while it may be their karma that they're suffering, you should, ideally all of us should be putting out our best version out there to change the situation. That's one.
Right.
Now the elevated response to this is that Swami knows, right? Like think about Swami. Swami knows when you and I are speaking, we were saying that, oh, it's the law of karma, they deserve it, right? And that's why things are happening to other, like when something goes wrong, or even if it happens to us, oh, we deserve it, that's why it's happening, it's karma. But Swami is not looking at it this way, right? Like Swami has engineered our life, not just this lifetime, but across lifetimes, across millions of lifetimes, he has engineered this. So when something happens to a particular soul, it is not because they deserve it, but because it is to their highest benefit. Swami is doing it just for you, like whatever is happening to anybody, so that they can reach him. That's it, right? And so he knows this, and he and yet when we cry to him or we ask him for help, like Swami is such pure compassion. Like, how is he able to reconcile his knowledge that anything that happens to us is for our ultimate best, for our delight and for our enjoyment, even if we don't see it at that point in time? How is he able to reconcile that with this compassion that he gives us, where he helps us, he creates these small miracles or big miracles or whatever, we feel like enveloped in his love. Like, so being able to really retain our sense of compassion along with the knowledge that yes, this is karma. I think once we do that, then we are Swami. Like we've hit it. So that's the place that we should all be aiming for.
Yeah.
But let's start with this preservation, self-preservation angle. And this another thing that I do want to, like, where I think we can also strike a middle ground. It doesn't have to be entirely self-preservation or the other thing. Is that once we know that everything is working out for the best, right? That's maybe what faith is. So like once we know that, then again we're triggered. Faith brings in equanimity, and once we're equanimous, we're able to move into compassion. We're able to move into action. And an example that I have of that is, so I have a baby boy. You know that. You're going to meet him very soon again. So within a matter of hours, but anyway, so I have a baby boy. He's 2 months old, and he has a lot of problem with gas, okay, because he can't sit upright, so he struggles with gas and burping in his body. So I know that he's going to be fine, right? Like I know that, it's just a matter of moments or maybe hours at max, but Satya is going to be fine at the end of this process. The gas has to come out. It's not going to stay inside his body forever.
Yeah.
Like I know the eventual outcome of this situation, which means I am not worried about the outcome. But then that doesn't mean that I don't feel his pain. Like I do feel his pain, but because I also know that this is for his, his growth, his development, that he's meant to go through this. I am able, but again, Satya's meant to go through. All 3-month-olds go through this. That doesn't mean I sit on my hand, I just watch him struggle, right? I still lift him up, I still try and burp him. I do everything I can to get that out. So then So what I'm feeling at that point in time, I'd like to say is compassion, where I'm able to act to move his suffering. I'm moved to remove his suffering. But I also know that, and I'm also pained to see his suffering. But then I'm not like, I know that things are going to be okay. It doesn't. My core isn't disturbed.
That's such a cute example, Vaishu. And in some ways, this knowledge of karma is sort of Swami testing our truest intentions, maybe. Are we truly compassionate and empathizing with the suffering of others, or are we so easily pacified, by the fact that, oh, it's their karma and therefore I can no longer feel their pain?
Yeah.
If we're truly feeling their pain, the concept of karma shouldn't desensitize us, I guess.
Exactly.
And that aspirational and self-preservation methods both are helpful in ensuring that we don't let karma hold back our empathy. We spoke earlier about baseline happiness, and that seems to be critical to mastering equanimity, right? Could you share tips on how to achieve a baseline that, will hold us in good stead?
That would be, I think everybody has their own, will find their own path. But for me, it has been gratitude. It's definitely the fact that if you're grateful for what is happening to whatever is happening to you, then that changes your mindset completely. And I'll speak a little bit more on that, because that can come across as a very cliched, quick response, but it isn't. It really works. It's a very actionable response. So one is gratitude, and the other is, and from gratitude, I think stems again affirmations, right? Like if you want the good things to happen, or you say the right things, or you rewire your mind accordingly, then I do firmly believe that things will happen. And but then just going back to gratitude now, when something good is happening to you, it's easy for us to say, oh, we're grateful for the situation. But when something bad is happening, even if we say, oh, we're grateful for the situation or whatever, like, how is it that I've often struggled with, like, that's a false feeling that I'm sending out to the universe, right? So even if I say, oh, I'm grateful for the pain or whatever, if I don't truly feel grateful, does that even count? Like, is it just lip service that I'm doing in this instance? And just the past week, I got the perfect answer. Like, I've been practicing it every day, so every like, I've been practicing it minute to minute, hour to hour, and it just transformed the way I think. Okay, so when something bad happens, or something you're uncomfortable with happens, then go ahead, say you're grateful for this happening to you, and you might feel a little false, but then also complete that thought in your mind by saying, I'm grateful for what is happening, and especially for the treasure that this moment hides within.
Wow.
And the second part is so powerful, Neil, because
because it's true,
like
right? That's the part where we're not being dishonest about that part, right? That's like the legit part, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's literally like, because all of us have faith, that much we have. We love Swami, we have faith, and we know that if something is happening, there's a treasure that moment hides within. And just being able to say that, it just transforms. Like, something's happening, I'm really tired, like a few days ago I was really tired, I'm like, oh God, and then I'm thinking I'm grateful for the tiredness, and I am not really. At that point I wasn't. I just wanted to sleep, but I was too tired to sleep. I was that tired. But then I'm like, I'm grateful for this tiredness, and then I remembered, I was like, and for the treasure that this moment hides within. And then I realized, oh my God, yeah, this tiredness is also
coming.
A larger
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I'm like, all like my even as I'm talking, I can, like, my shoulders
pick yourself up. Yeah. It's a gift in a strange wrapping paper, right?
Oh, beautifully said. Exactly, right? So that is gratitude. That's what gratitude does for you, because when it's about, like, when you acceptance is, and this I read somewhere, so it's not an original quote, but acceptance is when you are fighting, when you're not fighting reality, right? Like, you accept things as they are. But gratitude is when you're embracing reality, like when you know that everything that's happening to you is like the best thing ever, and you remind yourself of that fact. That's really important. You have to keep keep reminding yourself for for these feelings, all of these feelings to be evoked within you. And I have this has happened to me, and you know this already, but so I had a problem with my back, which I recovered from then, but then after having a baby, the back thing started flared up again. And so what happens is now I have to fix it. I started walking in the pool, okay? And I've had this fear of water since I was a child. So walking this pool is this very new experience, new wondrous experience. And when I'm in the pool, like I have to tell you like this, I'm going at like 10 p.m. in the night because that's the only time I get free. It just hits me all the things that needed to have happened for that moment to materialize, right? Like I had to have a back issue. I had to move to this place that I'm staying. We had to have a baby. We had to, like my husband needed to be free to take care of the baby. And then like the architect of this condo had to plan the pool in a certain way and like a certain depth for me to just be there. And the weather had to cooperate. Like everything had to come together for that moment to materialize in front of me and for me to experience that moment. So I'm just there, I'm twirling in the pool. I'm like, I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for, oh my God, Swami, you planned this out so well. And I look like a lunatic. But yeah, so be it. But that's the power of gratitude. And when you're grateful, that increases your baseline joy oh so much, like so instantly. And then when that happens, you're able to form this perspective that removes you from the situation. That happens when you're able to feel more. When things happen to you, you're able to shorten your reaction time. You're able to respond more lovingly. So really, it all just you're able to be compassionate. It all really boils down to that wonderful, wonderful feeling of gratitude for everything that Swami is and has done for us.
Genius exercise, Vaishu. I mean, how infinitely grateful I would genuinely feel if I constantly reflected on all the bits and pieces that had to fit for something in my life to manifest, you know?
Exactly.
And if we could do this mental checklist all the time, wow. And you know, when I think about it, in some ways, I feel that COVID has really impacted our baseline happiness in a positive way. Almost like the guy who lost his limb in your story. My social media feed is filled with people traveling again, couples and families reuniting, but there's this renewed sense of gratitude that's coming through these pictures. You know, nobody takes it for granted anymore.
Yeah.
And there's been so much self-discovery, growth, finding of new talents and hobbies. Even amidst this catastrophic disaster of a pandemic, so many have managed to find the treasure hidden inside.
Exactly.
So if we could sustain this feeling minute to minute, you know, hourly, hour to hour, equanimity, as you've so beautifully put, would be a lot easier.
Exactly.
So thank you so much, Vaishu, for such a nuanced perspective on equanimity. Dear listeners, it's now time for some prasadam pills. 1. Equanimity isn't about bottling up our emotions, but a magical state of feeling it, recovering from it before we react. And the outcome of this? A thoughtful, considered, compassionate response. 2. The mind will do its job of reacting, so let's acknowledge it. Listen to it as third person before we put ourselves in another person's shoes. Then we can always use affirmations to recreate our desired outcome. 3. Baseline joy is key to helping us maintain our equilibrium. And gratitude is that secret ingredient to increasing that baseline. So what's the mantra? I'm grateful for the treasure that hides within this moment. Until next Friday, happy scooping!